Hello, personal productivity enthusiasts and community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, the Productivity News Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Productivity Voice, and I'm Ray Sidney-Smith.
And I'm Augusto Pinaud.
And we're your hosts for Anything But Idle. This is International Women's Day and also Women's History Month, and it is episode 47. We're going to be talking about the top 10, well, not really top 10, but we'll get into it. But the top 10 female productivity organization and technology experts, and we're recording this on March 8th, 2021. Each week, we review and discuss the productivity and technology news headlines of the week. And to do that, we have invited Julie Bestry to join us on the show today. Julie Bestry is a certified professional organizer. She also happens to be a fellow Evernote certified consultant, and she is in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we talked about this before the show, and we made the promise to tell you all that she is fabulous. So welcome to Anything But Idle, Julie.
Thank you. I love it when you guys invite me.
We're grateful and happy to have you, and so happy International Women's Day. As now our woman on the panel this evening, we figured it wouldn't be great to have an all male panel on International Women's Day.
There are a lot of all-male panels out there, so I appreciate this. I don't feel like the token woman since there are only three of us, and you guys are the regulars. So basically, I am 100% of this panel. So we are very well represented for women on the panel because you guys are the hosts. I think you did a great job.
Wonderful. There you go. Check and check. Today's goal really is to elevate, I think, what are some well-known female voices in productivity, organization, and technology, as well as some lesser-known voices. And so what I always think about when it comes to this, I mean, this is the reason why I do anything in the personal productivity space, whether that be Personal Productivity Club, whether that be Productivity Summit, Anything But Idle. It really is helping to elevate voices of those of you who are out there doing great work in productivity, coaching and consulting, technology, as well as professional organizing in the home and office space. There are so many of you that I know out there in the world, and it's so wonderful to see you doing that work, and I want your voices heard by more people. And so, I always say I don't need to do this, so I really love being able to do this, to be able to elevate those voices. And so this is a really just great day for me to be able to do that. And so I'm looking forward to us having this conversation around Women's History Month. And what I thought we would do is, in essence, talk about some of the folks that we have in our hopper, in our repository. I asked folks in the Personal Productivity Club to give me names of people that they know, and so we're going to maybe go through some of those and talk about that. But then over the next week, we're going to put those folks into a list and let you poll them, and maybe we'll have a top 10 at the end of next week, and we can present that top 10. No matter what, everybody on the list, I hope, will get a little bit more exposure by virtue of that, and so that'll be really wonderful. And we see Dr. Frank Buck has popped into the chat. Hi, Frank. Good to see you, Dr. Buck. And so let's talk about some of the people that joined on the list. And Augusto, you put together some resources of some productivity roundups of other folks. But from what I saw in the chat from others was that there were a couple of people. I saw Mel Robbins show up in the list, and several people noted Mel Robbins. She is an attorney, but many people know her for her motivational work and on YouTube and TED Talks and so on and so forth. Julie, do you know Mel Robbins and her work?
I don't know her, and when I think it was Elena in your group had mentioned her, and so I wrote her name down, and I'm sure there'll be other names that we're looking at today that I'm going to go, ooh, I need to add them to my list.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna run through some of these names because some folks may know them and may not know them. What I'm gonna do though is anyone who is a New York Times best-selling author or those folks, they're actually gonna be left off of the list for our voting purposes. But I do want you to know that they exist. But I figure if you're a New York Times best-selling author or whatever, you probably don't need as much elevation in voice as some of these others that are on the list here who I really want you to know.
Hey, Ray, they worked hard to get on the top of that list.
Oh, I I don't doubt that. I'm not on a New York Times bestselling list either, and I would
But
love
you should
to
be.
maybe someday. But my point is that there are a lot of folks who go under the radar, and they have, like Gretchen Rubin. She clerked for Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, and she has written extensively, and she's a wonderful author and great all around podcaster. So people know her. And I think that's really good. I want to be able to elevate some maybe lesser known voices. And one of those is I hope I'm not butchering your name, but Ciara Conlon. She, I believe, is in Ireland, and so Ciara, hat tip, she's in Personal Productivity Club as well, and it's good to meet her in Personal Productivity Club, but also to know that she exists and that she's written several books and all kinds of fun stuff there. But she's a speaker on productivity, a life coach, and so just really great to see a productivity consultant and coach out there. Of course, I noted Gretchen Rubin. Most of you know her from Better Than Before, and For Tendencies, as well as the Happiness Project, and her podcast. I think you know it, Julie. What's her podcast?
It's Happier with Gretchen Rubin.
There you go. And she does that with her sister, I believe, right?
Right, Elizabeth. I wrote it down because Elizabeth Kraft.
Yeah, Elizabeth.
Wonderful. Then we have the inimitable Barbara Hemphill, the paper tiger lady. She came up on the list. And then Laura Vanderkam, the best-selling author of 168 Hours. We're actually discussing that on Productivity Book Group this March 31st. So if you want to join us for the discussion, you can go ahead and do that. And so Laura Vanderkam. And who else were some of the bigger names on the list before we go into Lisa Woodruff? Was on the list as well. I would consider her not in the she's a best-selling author also, I believe. I think she's like a Random House author. And I'm trying to think of anyone else who's like in that top tier. Of course, Julie Morgenstern. Most people know Julie Morgenstern, and so she came up on the list as well. All right, those are kind of our big names on the list that I saw. Now let's flip the script and talk about some of the lesser-known names. Who were some of the lesser names that cropped up on the list? Who wants to take that? Go for it, Julie.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think, because you asked about productivity, organizing, and technology, because it really does all go together. I don't think you're going to find anyone in NAPO or ICD who wouldn't immediately think of Judith Kolberg. Judith Kolberg really invented the whole concept of chronic disorganization. And she was at the start of the National Study Group on Chronic Disorganization, which is now the Institute for Challenging Disorganization, where alongside NAPO, you see most of the education and the rest of the education and training in our field, working with people with hoarding disorders, people with chronic disorganization, anyone with executive function disorders. And Judith has written both in that field. She co-wrote a book on ADD ways to organize your life, conquering chronic disorganization. But she also, I actually pulled the books off to the side. Sorry, forgot to disappear. But Organized for Disaster. And she wrote this book recently, Getting Organized in the Era of Endless, about everything that we talk about, that you guys talk about. The emails that keep coming, the text messages, and the Slack channels, and how it's almost like nothing ever gets completed. So Judith has to be considered from both the idea of everything with organizing, but also all of the little tendrils that get into our lives in terms of the psychology of what we have to know about in our field.
Absolutely. I know that you won't say this, but your name showed up on the list, and you will be on the list. I mean, again, it's one of those things where you don't have to worry about the conflict of interest, because I want you on that list. And also Stacy Harmon, who's one of our fellow Evernote certified consultants, and has a background in real estate, and does the Everdone course that helps people understand how to use Evernote and getting things done, and the she's also one of my fellow Evernote regional leaders for North America. So I'm really just always pleased to help people know more about the work Stacy does.
Stacey's fabulous. And I have to say, although I am an Evernote consultant, if I have anything that's a sticky wicket, you and Stacey are the people to whom I turn for my questions, because you are both so on the ball. And Stacey's webinars and videos, I will sometimes watch them more than once and say, look how she did that, because it's so carefully crafted that there's no confusion about how to implement something, and that's so important. So I hope Stacey's watching. Yay!
I also noted Deb Lee, and Deb Lee is a certified professional organizer, but she's just an all-around technology and productivity expert, and so it's always great to have Deb Lee among any list of best of. And who are some of the other names that I saw? I saw Claire Evans. She wrote a book called Broadband, The Untold Story of Women Who Made the Internet, is what I understand the book title is, and I have never heard of her before, which is both remarkable and sad, but also amazing because I just bought the book. So I always love having new books to read. And so Claire Evans, she'll be on the list. And again, one of those cases where I think that a lot of women in tech have not been elevated as much as obviously the male gender, and so that's really great to see. I noted earlier Lisa Woodruff, Diana in Personal Productivity Club noted Lisa Woodruff of Organize 365. She wrote a book called The Paper Solution, and she has a system called Sunday Basket.
The Sunday Basket, yeah.
All right, wonderful. Okay, and so Lisa Woodruff will be on that list. And what else? Who else? Michelle Gunn. Michelle Gunn is a friend and colleague. She runs the GTD Virtual Study Group every other week on Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern. And so wonderful to see Michelle on the list, and she just celebrated a birthday, so happy belated birthday to Michelle as well. And who else? Who else is on the list?
I didn't see it or add it to the list, but I think we should consider Tara Mcgillicuddy, who runs ADD classes. Tara, both for herself and for all of the guests she has, everyone from Ari Tuckman to all sorts of people in the ADHD and productivity field. And she runs these specific classes. She runs groups and study groups and does training as well. And so much of the productivity field that's not around business success, but about personal success, tends to touch on ADHD. So I think Tara Mcgillicuddy gets a thumbs up. And her site is addclasses.com, I think.
Fantastic. And then I also wanted to just give a hat nod to Sina Block, who will show up on the list. Sina is well known for working with ADHD high performers, and so helping people who are suffering from ADHD and being able to manage their lives well using her technique and her assessment. Really, really fun stuff there. And oh my gosh, there's so many other people on the list that will be on the list, but just note that we will be putting this list together. I'll put it out tomorrow on social and in Personal Productivity Club and in the Anything But Idle show notes. There will be a link to it with all of the folks, so you can check them out. And I'm really looking forward to maybe some of them being on the show in the future. So that'll be kind of fun to have more folks represented here on Anything But Idle as well.
Yeah, so and it comes the rant of the night, and because as much as I'm incredibly happy that we're celebrating, females in productivity and all that, it is kind of challenging for me that we do that once a year and for only a day, and that should be done every day. And I needed to put that out. It's still, I'm happy in just show notes. You will find, Google came and celebrate people. Apple Store celebrates 9 apps were designed by women to women. But still, I wish that we see this not as a one-day celebration, but as an everyday celebration.
Yeah, and so I'm not going to lament over spilled milk. I'm going to be focused on the positive and productive aspects of this. And so let's talk about those 9 awesome women-led apps. Okay, so we have Shine. I have no idea what Shine is, but I know that we'll get to this in a moment. Julie pointed out that Product Hunt had a femtech section, and we'll get to that shortly. But let's just go through them. Shine is an application that is run by Mara Liddy. I'm sorry, Mara, if I'm butchering your name, and Naomi Hirabayashi, and so they are.
I like that you had no trouble with that name.
Yeah, the Chinese and Japanese names I don't have a problem with. It is the British background names or like, you know, those kinds of Indo-European names where I'm like, quite so sure about that.
I can actually tell you a little bit about Shine. Shine is kind of like having your BFF checking in on you. You know, you have a friend who knows that you were going to be having a rough week. You know, you talked last week, knows that you were having a rough week, and checks in on you, and it sort of acts as though it were your friend. It knows how to prompt and sort of cheerlead you to get beyond the difficult points.
Fantastic. We have Her, which is a dating app and part of the queer community. And so if you're lesbian, bisexual, or a queer woman, there's a dating app for you. Wonderful. Then Clue, it's about cycles regarding your menstrual cycle. So there's a menstrual cycle application, it looks like. Clue helps you make sense of symptoms and understand what's normal for your body, which is really great. Hopscotch, I'm not going to go through all of these, but just, you know, they're out here. We'll put a link to this in the show notes, but it's really great to see, like, this is it looks like Hopscotch is programming for kids, and so it like helps kids learn how to code. Really fun. And so again, women-led or predominantly for women in terms of that. Kitchen Stories Recipes is all about engaging home cooks to broaden their culinary horizons. That's fun. I might try that app out. Ground News is a news application built by a female entrepreneur. It seems like, where is it? Harleen Kaur? Maybe that's how you pronounce that name. Marigold Lake, which is a coloring books app, very cool. And then Houzz. Many people maybe don't know Houzz, but it's kind of a design and house home decor kind of application that talks about all kinds of things in that residential and commercial design space. You were going to say, Julie?
I was just going to say the residential organizers in NAPO are very big on Houzz.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And then there is an article. Augusto, did you pull this article in here from Neverwhere?
I did.
Tell us a little bit about it.
So it talks, the article brings, you know, people who are, it's specific to IT, and it talks about the people who, I'm trying to touch my computer. Sorry, I'm having technology issues today. I want the laptop who has no touch screen to work. I changed my office over the weekend, and now I'm dealing with the nuances of certain computers not having touchscreen. But anyways, it talks about the woman who revolutionized the IT, and it was a pleasure to read. You know, I didn't know a lot of them, you know, and it was awesome to read, you know, people really on the 1930s and the 1940s, and how, if we look at some of these challenges today as difficult for a woman in the IT world, you know, it is really interesting to see, you know, these people. And at the bottom of the article, it talks about the hard truth and what is happening and where is happening with that. So, it was interesting to read. A lot of this we don't know, but it's really interesting for me to read what the challenges were for these people to really make it there and discover who they are and being able to learn more about them.
Yeah, I have to agree. You know, we've heard a lot more about Ada Lovelace recently, and Katherine Johnson she showed up in the movie, which I want to say Invisible, but that's not it, about NASA. But I love that it talked about Hedy Lamarr, because not only did she and a male collaborator who was composer, I believe, come up with what is the precursor to Wi-Fi. But she also came up with ways of improving aeronautics for Howard Hughes. And people know that she was in movies. She was partnered with Charles Boyer, Spencer Tracy, Jimmy Stewart, Paul Henry, William Powell. I mean, all sorts of famous male actors in the 40s and the early 50s. And she was considered at one time the most beautiful woman in the world. And that's how they talked about her. They talked about her in terms of her value being her beauty.
Correct.
And she was brilliant. I mean, aeronautics with Howard Hughes and the precursor to Wi-Fi. And I think it's really important that we have these women to look on in terms of historical reference, so that when kids get to hear stories, they don't just hear about 21st century women doing things now, but they get to see, for boys and girls, to hear that there's a depth of experience and talent in women that goes back centuries.
Yeah, that's and I agree with you. That is, to me, really, having kids, for me, that part is so important, that they understand not only that, but they understand that the fact that other people may see certain things as limitation, as you said, we don't hear about the brilliant mind of this person. We hear, oh, she was considered one of the most pretty person in the world. Why? But also, I love to show those examples to my kids and say, look, even when nobody, recognize that or see that, that doesn't mean that you don't continue pushing forward to what you believe and what you're good at.
Yeah. So I wanted to just note a couple things. Frank is noting here in the chat that Hopscotch, which we were noting about the 9 apps that Apple highlighted in their roundup, was just on Shark Tank, and so that's really cool to hear. I didn't know that. And in the article that we'll put a link to this in the show notes, it talks about what you can do. And I mean, from my perspective, the thing that I have greatest impact on is my family and the people who are close to me. And so I have young women in my family, and I just can't be happier about the fact that my baby sister, who also just celebrated a birthday recently, happy birthday, Rebecca, belated, and she's in science. And so it's just like the idea of pushing girls and young women into STEM and giving them the opportunities to do that, not just saying like, oh, well, STEM is for boys and whatnot, all that kind of misogynistic nonsense. We can force the conversation, and that will then help them make that decision. Now, obviously, you don't want to force people into things, but you want to give them the opportunity to be able to say, you know what, this could be for me. I could be a scientist. I could be, in technology and do these kinds of things. And I'm seeing more and more of that break away, and more young people on, especially young women, capable of saying, you know what, yeah, I could go lead this tech company. I could go do this project. So.
And how they say, representation matters. If you see someone who looks like you, then you believe that you can do that too. But what's also really important is not just that girls see that they can do that, but that boys see that girls can do that. Because all of the issues with the glass ceiling, all of the issues with the boys club that have kept women out of the C-suite, out of the programming rooms, we can countermand that not just by bringing the girls up to believe they can do it, but bringing the guys up to not even think twice and assume that girls can be on par with them.
Right. If there's a limiting belief in women and their abilities, it's easy to then not elevate them into roles that allow them, or even to say at a startup event, hey, there goes a woman, maybe she could be my co-founder, or she could be my senior technology lead or CTO of my startup. Those things happen because there's this cultural misunderstanding about capabilities. So you're absolutely right. We need to make sure that everybody is brought up in a culture that shows equality. And so I just want to note these things for those of you who are listening to the podcast afterward. The article notes some things that you can do. One, being mindful of recruiting, and so opening up the recruiting to have gender neutral terminology, and this is really important for not just women but also for those who are trans or who are non-gender conforming. And then creating an environment that actively supports women. That's obviously a given. I'm not quite sure why we need to put that there, but I'm sad that we need to. It's like every time there's a stop sign, it's because some person has unfortunately ran through the intersection and hit somebody. It's like, unfortunately, we need to say it explicitly. Offering female groups and events at in environments within companies, but also within organizations and in communities, and then of course support IT programs so that we can bring more STEM exposure to folks out there in the communities. So good thoughts there, but I really I want everybody who can impact the people who are closest to them in the ways in which they feel most comfortable, and pushing a little bit beyond that, because I think it's a little bit about becoming uncomfortable, right? It's tough to have these conversations about inequality. It's tough to have conversations about whether that be economic, whether that be gender-based, whether that be race, whether that be about gender, sexuality. All these things are tough, right? They're difficult things. We haven't even gotten over, international types of issues. Better yet, these very ingrained parts of ourselves. So I really do want us to be able to be mindful of the fact that it's okay if you're uncomfortable with the conversation, right? It's not meant to be a comfortable situation, but that everybody needs to be welcoming even in that conversation. And I think that's really important also, that I hear a lot of anger from a lot of voices, and I understand the anger. At the same time, we need to bring people closer to each other with kindness and with acceptance and empathy, because men who have been raised in an environment where they don't know how to deal with this need to be brought in gently, right? If anything, we have to show more kindness in that mindset than less, because they're fragile. Augusto, you also brought this Google Web Creators article that Google is promoting the hashtag Black Girls Who Blog, and so we have some blogs from female bloggers and female Black bloggers. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
This article was what we refer as a rabbit hole. Okay, I found this article. I'm going to say I wasn't familiar with them. Okay, so I click open a new tab, and then I open a new tab, and then I open a new tab, and I don't know how long it happened. Okay, but I'm going to say I had a really good time reading those blogs and learning a little bit more about them. So I figured it out that if I didn't know, some people will care for them. So I wanted to bring them, and it was interesting because, some of them were about topics that I don't necessarily, it's on my realm, okay? I mean, Cici talks about the model, but talks about the business. Danielle talks about fashion and beauty, they were so well written that it were really, absorbing you. And at some point, I said, okay, stop and copy the link and move with what I was doing. But if you want a really well-written set of articles, please go there. Read what it is, read what they are about, because really it was for a person. Again, I am not a fashion person. I have zero intentions, no stake to claim in that area. Okay, when fashion was, in the creation of me, when they say, how about fashion? I say to that guy, no, forget about it, nothing. Okay.
They left out your fashion genes.
No, I get zero of them. But it was really interesting to read about them and to see a completely different approach on many of these things. And so even that I'm not a fashion person, I spend, again, more than what I'm going to admit in this show or anywhere else, reading them, because they were really well written and really interesting and engaging articles.
I want to just give a quick hat tip. I am the Google Small Business Advisor for Productivity, so I obviously promote all of the things that Google has for small business, specifically Google Workspace and so on and so forth. And one of the programs Google has is called the Google Digital Coaches Program, and they are for urban and predominantly Black, and people of color focused programs. And the one in Pittsburgh, Google Pittsburgh, the digital coach in Pittsburgh is Kaishira Moffett. And so just hat tip to Kaishira and her work. And she is a wonderful, she has a wonderful Black female-owned business and does digital marketing for business owners in the area, and is just all around, I think, a great representation of the community. And so just wanted to give her a shout out. And then last but not least, I think Julie, did you have a little
I
comment?
did, and it sort of dovetails with what Augusto was saying about going through down a rabbit hole. We talked about women-led apps and women bloggers, and when we're looking at the blogging space, we should really be looking at the newsletter space, something like Substack, where you have all of these newsletter writers. And I subscribed to one, and now, as if I didn't have enough email, I have maybe half a dozen newsletters that I read every week from they're all by women and some women of color. And so I want to sort of give a shout out to not just blogs, but to newsletters, because when you were talking about the top 10, I was going to say, what you see in these women written newsletters is that they're collaborative. I have seen them do trades and write guest articles for one another's each week. I have seen the same, one is writing an article and you see it promoted in all of these others. And I really have to recommend also podcasts. Call Your Girlfriend podcast. It's I always get her name wrong. Aminatu Sow, SOW, and Ann Friedman. And they have the Call Your Girlfriend podcast. They each have their own newsletters, and then the podcast has its own newsletter, and then they just published a book. And so there's also Invisibilia and through NPR, a podcast with Alexis Spiegel and Hannah Rossen about psychology and scientific theories related to behavior, which really tends to pull in a lot of what we talk about in the productivity field. Call Your Girlfriend is a lot of life balance as well as political and social and personal issues. You already talked about Happier with Gretchen Rubin. And I'd like to mention Roxane Gay. She blogs both at Medium and Dropbox blog. And these are really compelling women who have a lot to say in these areas that we talk about, particularly that sort of attempt, why are we trying to be productive? How are we going to be productive when the world is falling apart? So I figured bringing to you what I read and what I'm listening to might be helpful, because a lot of the guys listening probably aren't familiar with most of those names.
Yeah, and Roxane Gay, I mean, her book Hunger is riveting and raw and sad and amazing. So if you have not read Roxane's work, you must. It is really, it's eye-opening, and it's also, again, it's uncomfortable, and I think we all need discomfort in order to have growth. And it is really, I mean, it's just such an amazing book. And of course, she's written The Bad Feminist, and she's read other work, but I mean, that book by itself was haunting in so many ways, but in the best possible way. You also brought to our attention the Product Hunt Femtech section, and while we won't go through all of the apps because there's it just keeps going and going, I did want to bring it to everyone's attention that you brought it to my attention, which are all of these applications that are focused on women and women's issues like fertility, period tracking, menstrual cycle tracking, pregnancy and nursing care, women's sexual wellness, reproductive system healthcare, and so many other things. But there are some really great applications in here.
And we look at when Apple first came out with its health app, that was one of the things that really starkly showed that men were working on these things because things that women needed weren't included. A lot of what we saw in terms of, not just with Apple, but across the board, tend to be things that the guys who are in these positions where they're doing the coding, they're thinking in terms of tracking performance, okay? But it's not that women don't care about tracking health with regard to performance, but we have an entire extra layer of healthcare issues that guys don't have to consider. And so more and more of these apps are not only created for women, but by women, everywhere from the coding up to the C-suite level. Say that three times fast.
So if you just go to producthunt.com and type in femtech, you'll find this page. And so I just wanted to let everybody know that that's how you can get to it. And thank you, Julie, for bringing that to our attention. Really, really great. And so with that, I think we've talked a lot about all of these things. Just note that I will be tracking all of these with Augusto, and we will get this into the show notes so you can see the list of all of these folks. And then, as I said, I'm going to have a poll that I'm going to put together, and we will share it out via all the socials, and folks can vote on it. Vote for Julie. No, we're not coloring the vote. But yeah, please share it far and wide so that folks can vote on it, and we can have some fun around this. I really would like just more people to see it, just so we can elevate voices more than who's winning. I don't really care about the winning part. I really care about the ability for more people to see the names of female entrepreneurs, but also female coaches, consultants, professional organizers, technologists who are doing these things. So again, as Julie noted, there's more of a sense that there are people out there who just happen to be female who are doing this stuff also. And the more we can get into that mindset, the less there is this division between the genders, and more there is just an understanding that we're all capable of doing things, and let's just truly build toward. We can never have a true meritocracy in my mind, but we can work more toward meritocratic society, and I look forward to that. And so thank you all for this conversation, and that really then turns us over to our news portion of the show. As you all know, Augusto and I track all of the productivity and technology news each week, and so let's get into our news this week. Augusto, what's our first story this week? You are muted, sir.
I made it for almost 35 minutes. Canva acquires the background removal specialty, and I'm going to budget Kaleido. It's interesting.
Kaleido. It's kind of like kaleidoscope.
Okay, good. See, that's I told you I was going to budget. But it is interesting because Canva has come into the market as a really serious competitor in this market, and has grown and grown and grown really quiet. It's still not making the noise that it should, but it's really, really powerful. And it's good to see that they acquired this, being background removal, one of those things that so many people struggle with. Yes, there are many apps that do it, including Keynote will do it if you know where to find it, but most people don't. So adding that to their tool set, I think it's going to be really, really interesting. So
to clarify, the functionalities in Canva Pro already exist. So you do have a background removal effect. What they did with the purchase of Kaleido, they're hoping to actually advance that technology to be able to do more in that space. So the tool currently has it. If you have Canva Pro, you can just click on the image, you'll see effects, and then click on background remover. But now they're trying to up the ante on this, and so I think actually Canva is also a woman-led tech company out of Australia. I'm not sure, but if it's not, sorry, but I think there is a female tech lead at Canva. But either way, so very, very exciting to see them adding that technology, further, building on that technology with Kaleido.
And a lot of people either didn't know about background removal or are coming to this. Canva seems to be a very a female-centric, woman-centric, not a community, but the people who are using it are very visually creative. And so what you see is a lot of people will say, oh, I love what you did on your blog there. I love that infographic that you created. And people go, Canva. And the removal tool, since you guys are going to be talking about hardware soon, and I'm going to step back from that whole discussion. I do have one thing. I wish that they had removal tools like Remove BG and all of these things. In the 50s, my mom had gotten married, she got divorced, and my grandmother took a scissors and cut my mother's first husband literally out of every single photo. And so there are all of these photos with like a random hand on a shoulder, disembodied. And I think that a lot of photographs out there could have been dramatically improved by something like Collide or Remove, or what Canva can do in the premium space, had we had that back when we had print photos.
And so just as clarification, the CEO and co-founder, there are 3 co-founders of Canva. One of those co-founders is the CEO, and that is Melanie Perkins.
Melanie Perkins.
So very good to see a female-led company out of Australia doing something as amazing as Canva is doing. I mean, it's basically replacing Adobe, Photoshop and InDesign for so many small businesses. Mm-hmm. And as Frank is noting in the chat that he loves Canva, and so does Sabrina. Good on both of you.
Not only
it's a really amazing tool.
Not only is replacing, it's giving really the access to many a small business to this kind of tools, because Adobe InDesign, it's complex. It's really incredibly powerful, but it's really complex. And now Canva allows them to give that. But in addition to what Julie said, my grandmother used to say, the in-laws to the side, please, so we can fix the pictures easier.
Oh goodness! Next up in news is a story that I'm really excited about.
So there is an article from TechRadar talking about a totally upgradable laptop that will be as powerful as your MacBook Pro. And the geek in me is really excited about this, about the idea of being able to buy the pieces and upgrade this and make the laptop go into the parts and make it even more powerful. I wish that instead of a 13.5, it's an 11-inch screen, but that's because my beloved MacBook 11-inch is going to die soon, and I don't want anything bigger. That said, the ability to be able to add and upgrade every piece of the laptop, it's really, really, really exciting for a lot of people, me included, I think.
Yeah, I think this is revolutionary in a way. What we're really talking about is a more sustainable, eco-friendly way of dealing with computing today. I think the first step to this was probably the Raspberry Pi Foundation and the building of low-cost technology that could be put into the hands of people that can't afford it, and even geekier people like me that, I'm still in love with my Raspberry Pi 400. And so, there are those of us, but it really puts technology into the people's hands that can do that, which of course reduces overall waste when we are trying to ship technologies that are very expensive and have too many parts and can't be affordable. This is now bringing that to the next tier, which is taking all of us who buy lots of technology and are constantly replacing that technology and throwing that stuff into landfills. We are now capable of having hardware that we can upgrade. There was a program for a phone that was supposed to be like this. We had covered a few months ago, kind of a modular phone that could consistently be updated, that may be coming on the market. I can't remember, but either way, this is just amazing. I'm very, very bullish on this idea that we can stop throwing away laptops. We can actually upgrade them truly. They talk about the idea that you're going to have a screwdriver in the box when you get the laptop, so that you'll be able to immediately change out parts, upgrade, and customize it to your needs. This is the kind of technology that I think really has longevity, and I'm hoping that OEMs embrace the technology and go from there. So.
Yeah, and there is a couple of things. And a shout out that Dell specifically has done things like this, keeping their laptops, easily to upgrade to a certain extent, replace drives, so you can keep the upgrade and hardware lasting a little bit more. And on the first part, we talk about Neverware with the article on females, but that is another company that now part of Google, it's allowing for these old laptops to be turned into almost a Chromebook and make the life of these ones much, much longer, and the need to replace also last longer. So I think this will be really, really exciting if when comes to the market.
Fantastic. Next up.
Well, in the keeping, with all these things, Apple now is starting to show the iPhone and MacBook repairability score. So France is asking manufacturers that they show what you can repair or not repair on your devices, and Apple has introduced this. And I have mixed feelings with this, on the sense that I understand what they're trying to do, and I agree. I don't know if I want to try to repair my iPhone, even if they give me a 6 out of 10. They can give me a 10 out of 10, and I will still consider that as no friendly. But I think it's important that I don't know if it's really about giving the information to the people that this device is not as friendly to repair, and when you make the decision. And the problem with this is what people believe is their skills to fix devices may not match with that 6 out of 10. And I think we are going to see a lot of people disappointed with that devices.
I think it's important to have this. I think this is great. I want this 6 out of 10 to be a scarlet letter on any devices that cannot be repaired. So much trash, so much electronics trash goes into the landfills because people cannot repair them. And the fact that the iPhone 12 is a 6 out of 10, 12 generations later, that's unconscionable to me. That we are in essence, cracking screens and breaking things and not capable of having longevity of our technology. This is, again, Apple and really all the other OEMs. I'm not picking on just Apple here, but they are basically setting up the mean time before failures to be very short, so that we're constantly buying new electronics. And while that's great for a lot of industries, I don't mind the idea of us having new technologies and talking about them. People should not be forced to upgrade because they break a phone jack or something like that. They should be able to repair these devices. What the factors that they put into this support document I thought was really interesting. They just highlighted some of them, and it talks about the availability of documentation for how to repair, use, and maintain the products. Novel idea that you should be able to know how to maintain your electronics. For example, batteries are very different in the way in which you should charge and discharge batteries. Most of the time, OEMs don't tell you how to actually do that. The manufacturers just let you guess, and when you break your battery or you overcharge it, you run it too many cycles, then you have to buy a new one, which is of course only good for them. Not good for the planet, not good for the consumer. Disassembly, spare parts, the price of spare parts, and the availability of software updates. Augusto, I have a Lenovo Duet, a Chromebook, and I recently accidentally dunked the keyboard in some water, and the laptop itself is perfectly fine. It's just the keyboard. Well, I learned from going to Lenovo and talking to their support team and so on and so forth, I can't buy or repair that keyboard. Hear me out. I cannot repair the keyboard, and I also cannot buy a new one. It's just like they don't have it as a part. It's only purchasable with the device itself. And it drives me mad that would be the case, that a perfectly great operating laptop is now dysfunctional because they don't have the spare part for me to be able to do, and I can't repair it at all. So it's that kind of stuff that I think we really need to be mindful of going forward in how we purchase, making conscious decisions about how we purchase things, both for our pocketbooks, but also for the environment.
No, and I agree, and I didn't thought that this was going to come with that pain of your keyboard. So we have discussed this keyboard many hours, and
Yes.
and it's been painful. It is painful, and so there are many good things about this, especially that, but also this will only be good as people also understand what are the really needs that they have. because as I agree with you there, the part of the problem is we get to the Apple store or to any manufacturer, Apple because it's who we are picking today, and you go to repair, and most people choose the new device. Well, now that I'm going to anyways pay $100, let me upgrade to the new device. So as I think this is really, really important, also we, all of us, need to also think on that and reconsider, our upgrade cycles and reconsider, when we fix and when we upgrade. Because I think, at least on the US, our default is upgrade, not fixed.
I think you're right. I think I'm really atypical in that. So my car, which I consider my new car, I got a little over 3 years ago. My last car I kept for 21 years, and the car before that I kept for 11. I'm using an iPhone 6 because it works fine. I don't need an 8 or a 10 or a 12. And I'm sure now that I've said that, it'll die tomorrow because we've had this conversation. But I would much rather repair something with the notion that I'm going to use it until it's no longer functional for me. And that does seem to be a fairly atypical view in the people to whom new products are marketed. And it's one of those things where it's really easy for a company to try and get a new customer. They don't worry. Think about your cable company giving all sorts of bonuses for you to get your cable, your internet, whatever, to become a new customer. But they don't do a lot to satisfy existing customers, which is why you get that churn, why people go from cell phone company to cell phone company. If companies that made products or offered services in this arena cared as much about the environment and about their clientele being loyal, it would be better, as you said, right, for the environment, be better for the companies because they wouldn't have to try so hard to get all new customers because people would gravitate toward them and stay with them. So I think you're right. This is a very, Augusta, this is a very Western, this is a very American approach to say, hey, this thing doesn't work as well as it did before, so I'm going to buy a new one rather than spend a tiny bit of money to fix it and give myself another year or two before I have to think about replacing.
That's correct. And because of that, we, at least again, in the United States, we do not have the infrastructure to repair many of these things, and the repairs, even if you find somebody who can do it, then it turns to be so expensive that in many cases, we have a couch that we wanted, we have it, but we wanted to do the upholstery. And it is so expensive to do it instead of, it's almost cheaper to go and buy a new one. But it's not because there is only demand. There is no enough offering. So that happened with electronics. That happened with so many things.
Yeah, I mean, there's no, I mean, I live in a city, but there's no Apple store here. I have to drive either to Atlanta or Knoxville if I want to go to an Apple store. Well, I have virtual clients around the country who live in rural areas where they would have to drive 6-8 hours to get to an Apple store to replace something that's a fairly insignificant issue. So again, people buy and rebuy from companies that they feel value them. And I think eventually tech companies are going to have to take notice of this. Whether we need to codify it in law, if we have to look at what they're doing in France, whatever we have to do, we need to do something because down the road, what we're doing now isn't sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. And so Sabrina's noting in the chat that we live in an era of consumerism, and I think it is very true that we are kind of constantly pendulum swinging between these, these poles. And I hope that we can come to some center space here where we can balance out the consumeristic perspectives, which is that, yeah, we all like new and novel things. I'm not against us having new and novel things by no means. I buy a lot of new gadgets. So don't count me as some angel. But I am very, very cautious about how I support and nurture those things so that they're not going back into the landfill after all is said and done, and buying carbon offset credits for shipping and all those things that just kind of help buffer the other side of that. And the other thing is, I by day I coach digital marketing for small businesses, and I'm constantly educating them about the fact that the not new buyers, basically millennials who are in their 30s, some of them are going to be turning 40. They are the dominant purchasers today. Everyone younger than them, including some of the baby boomers, most of the Gen Z, all of them care about the environment as a mechanism of their purchase process. So they're taking that into account when they're buying, right? And the smallest minority of baby boomers, even, it's like a 20-something% to 30-something% of them are considering that in their purchase process. And then the numbers just get dramatically higher as we go along. So if businesses want to stay in businesses, especially technology businesses, they're going to have to start thinking about how they're taking that into account. So I just really hope that that message is being pushed home. All right, Augusto, what's our next story? A little bit of Chrome goodness.
Chrome goodness. I have
Yeah, the Chrome
hackers.
profiles.
Oh, you have them in a different order than me. Oh no, here.
Maybe I got them in a different order, but yeah.
Yes, you got it. That's fine. So the next one comes from the Chrome world and is create a space for yourself in Chrome. And I recently begin, because of work, testing the Chromebook in a more serious way because of clients, and I have now the Chromebook and Spaces. And it is really cool to be able to get into the Chromebook and then have these things, especially when I do demos, spaces that are just for that demo. And then I can come back to my work and then I can come back to do something else. So it's been really, really cool to see those things. And the article shows you how to create this, how to create these spaces. But it's awesome to be able to see those profiles where you can come and now if you have work and you have family and even if you have kids that you let them play with the devices, create a profile for them so that way they have their space when they come and do things without messing up with yours. So if you don't know how to create a space on Chrome, please look at the article.
Fantastic. I'm really looking forward to this. The way currently Google manages profiles in Chrome is, let's say, not desirable for me. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how Chrome profiles helps to manage those pieces. For example, I have clients where I do enough work for them that I want to have a completely different profile for them. And now I can do that. And I'm really, really excited to be able to just segment those pieces away so that when I'm not working on it, I don't want to see it. And that amount of productive focus by being able to just default that stuff via filter out of the way is going to be really, really powerful. So looking forward to seeing that. Let's move on to the YouTube story, and then we can double back to the actual order.
So the YouTube story is, there is a video, the link is in there. It's a YouTuber who took a Mac Mini and turned it into the first official or unofficial silicon, with the new Apple Silicon M1 into an actual Mac, and not a Mac Mini, but an iMac. And it was really interesting to see. I wish I have that courage to buy an M1 and do something like that. But it was really interesting to see. We all know that Apple was affected, as all of us, by COVID. That's make the release of the M1 in the different conditions that our normal release will have been. But it's really interesting to see people not waiting for them and really modifying this. So I understand that's an article from A Geek to a Geek, but it was really, really beautiful to see that video.
Yeah, I'm not going to do this. I'll never do this. So the building Google Assistant on your Windows machine, that I got through, and I was really excited. So everybody knows I've been able to patchwork together. You do have to have a Google Cloud account, as we noted in a couple episodes ago when we talked about it. It is not for the faint of heart, right? It takes some work. This, on the other hand, even with a brother who has a degree in electronics engineering, there's no way I'm tearing apart an M1 and putting and baking that into an iMac. But it was really actually interesting to watch.
Yeah,
So
I wish to tell you that I learned that I'm intelligent like you and I learned that way. That's not how it worked for me. Well, how it worked for me was my wife MacBook Pro many years ago, probably like 10 or 15 years ago, had the connector was loose, and I said, "Oh, I'm sure I can fix that." How that story ended up was my wife really mad on the other side of the table saying, "And now?" And I look at her and say, "And now, honey, we drive to the Apple store and you pick a new MacBook and I will pay for that with a smile."
yeah. So, all right, a little bit of unfortunate news about Apple iPhones that are pre 14.14.1, right?
Yeah, but we know they're right now on three for so the news is that the iPhone, the Uncover release a tool now that can hack and jailbreak almost every iPhone that is on 14.3. Apple has stopped certifying 14.3. Apple is right now on 14.4 and coming to release there is beta versions of 14.5. So yes, it's that's one of the reasons why not only Apple as well as Google, they have been really making big efforts into getting those upgrades happen. Even Microsoft now, it's tracking. Years ago was Apple tracking who upgrade to the latest version, and now almost every software manufacturer is trying to get everybody to really be on the latest. And this is the reason. As computers are more and more in our hands, there is hackers who are trying to get in, and you don't have the latest, you are at risk.
Yeah, so I'll give the flip side argument here, which is that Apple should not have a proprietary system in which they are not allowing us to see the code to be able to then fix issues ourselves. And that is why I'm a proponent of the Android operating system, because I can see the code, and if there's something wrong, I can fix it. It's just an ongoing battle, I think, between hackers and the rest of us. And unfortunately, the hackers are always going to have a leg up on security researchers at Apple when we don't use the global market to be able to combat in that sense. And Apple does a bang up job. I'm not saying that Apple doesn't do a great job with their security, but unfortunately in this particular case where everything, I know I said 14.14, but I meant 14.4, everything prior to 14.4 now is susceptible to this, and there are going to be a group of people who do not update to 14.4 on older devices. And just so you know, if you're running anything prior to 14.4 and a hacker gets physically a hold of your device, that is a scary proposition. So that being said, let's move on in the show. What's next? I'm all out of order now, so you have to tell me where we are.
Well, now that happened. You create the order, but that's fine. So the next news we have, let's go about Outlook, and let's talk about the new how Microsoft Outlook calendar is a lot, or is going to look a lot more like Trello. And there are two things that were interesting about this. One, obviously, is the fact that they are changing the calendar to make it more, like columns in Trello. But second, that there is how much people is getting comfortable in the Kanban boards and how people is getting comfortable in things like Trello, to the point that Microsoft is noticing and trying to give you a familiar interface. And that is important, because it's important to remember that Microsoft for many years, was the leader on the interface. Actually, when you move, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, when Apple Calendar came out, people say, "Oh, but it's not Outlook." Okay, and now Microsoft looking into the other developers into what they are doing, and that it's a fresh air for some people and for some eyes of designers.
So there are a couple of really important productivity pieces here. One is that Outlook has always been an all-in-one productivity system, and they are recognizing that people are having to utilize tools outside of Outlook in order to be productive, especially in the enterprise world. And so they have decided to start going down this path of trying to bake in some productivity pieces into the tool. This first step was Microsoft To Do. I think purchasing Wunderlist and baking in the parts of Wunderlist into the Microsoft To Do app. Now they're bringing that into, they've synchronized those tasks between Microsoft To Do and Outlook. You're going to see more integration with Teams and Microsoft Project into Teams as well. So Planner, all of those pieces kind of coming together. The idea of the Trello board in there, I have a tendency to be a little bit skeptical here that this is going to really pan out to be as wonderful as Microsoft wants it to be, especially since this will not look good on mobile devices, and they are really terrible about synchronizing their applications across web, Windows, Mac, and mobile. And so if they can figure that part out and really bake a Kanban board based system into their interface across the ecosystem, this can be really powerful. Until that happens, I'm gonna just earmark that as to be determined, because I don't trust Microsoft to be able to pull that off. If this was Apple baking a Kanban board into Apple Notes or into Calendar or into Reminders, I would be paying attention to that, and Atlassian should be shaken in their boots. But in this particular environment, as well as Microsoft has done in the last few years with their cloud services and otherwise, I just really don't think that this is going to be useful to them.
And my mother told me, if you have nothing nice to say, move to the next news. So the next news is about millions of VPN users have personal details stolen.
And this is just our general note in every show that you need to be very mindful of your security. If you want to be unproductive, get hacked. We need to really be conscious of the fact that everything we do now has some digital footprint. And yes, VPNs are great, but only if they are not taking your data and tracking your data, and so you need to pick your VPNs wisely. I'm a big fan of Private Tunnel. They may not be the fastest VPN in the world, but they are run by the Open VPN project. It's a very nominal fee. You can have up to, I think, 3 or 6 different devices in an Open Tunnel account. And am I getting the name right? Open Tunnel? Let me make sure. I think I said Private Tunnel. Did I not say Private Tunnel? I haven't had my coffee this afternoon, clearly. But Private Tunnel is the application. They're run by the OpenVPN project. Yeah, Private Tunnel. And again, it's just about having the right VPN. If you want to be able to watch, like my sister-in-law loves watching Korean shows. She's from South Korea, and so she likes watching Korean shows. Like, she's back home, and they're in Portland. So it's nice to be able to use a VPN to be able to watch those shows like you're in another country. That's all well and great, but you just have to make sure you have the right VPNs that are not tracking you. And clearly these VPNs were tracking these people's data, and now all of that data has been exfiltrated to some hackers. That is not great at all. So, all right, on with the show, Augusto. Let's move on from my PSA about security.
No, I think your PSA about security, it's really important. So, our next news is, and I'm going to let you talk about this because it's all about Google phones and the Pixel, so and the underwater photos. So I'm going to let you talk more about that. I am the iOS guy, and my knowledge of Google, it's really, really limited, and I'm planning to keep it that way, by the way.
Yeah, so Android 11 is the current, mostly current operating system for Android, and so on 11 Google has basically brought out a couple new features in between now and when Android 12 scales out fully to everyone. So once they launch it out of beta and it goes into GA, into general release for folks, general availability as we call it, GA. Until then, they still release features, and one of the features was the few features are in the recorder application. So if you're running a Pixel device, you can use something called a recorder. And recorder is an application that is, if you know what Otter is, Otter.ai, it's basically an application that does that directly on your phone. So using some machine learning, it's capable of recording and transcribing the audio directly on your device, so it's secure. So it's not pushing anything to the cloud, but now they're giving us a web app and the ability to back up those recordings to the cloud. So I can have a recorded audio and the text that it has transcribed backed up to my Google Drive account. So that's a really great additional feature. I'm a big fan of Google Recorder because I'm capable of recording myself, just thinking out loud. Journal entries I do in Recorder now so that I can just talk it out and then copy and paste the text into my journaling app, and all kinds of great. So now if you go to recorder.google.com, you can go ahead and play search and share the audio files that you choose to upload via the backup functionality from Recorder. Then in Google Fit, using the cameras on the Pixel devices, you're capable of now measuring your heart rate and respiratory rate, and and heart rate. Yeah, so you're capable of measuring heart rate and respiratory rate using the cameras on your Pixel device. So that's pretty cool. I don't see many people taking great advantage of that. If you have one of the Kraken Sports Universal smartphone housings, you're now capable of connecting to the features in the Google Camera app on Pixel phones in order to be able to take underwater photographs. And it's just giving more features to your Pixel phone inside of the Google Camera app that otherwise wouldn't be available to you before. And then the one that I'm really excited about, I'm going to skip the Pixel stand, who cares about that, but the most important piece here is that within Gboard, you now have Smart Compose in select applications. So you might see Smart Compose inside of Gmail when you're typing something and it gives you some like light grayed out text that if you hit tab, it then enters it. This is both in the mobile application as well as in the desktop. And if you don't see it, you can turn that on from the gear icon. Click on gear icon, click all settings, and then you'll find the Smart Compose feature there in the Compose sections. Well, now they are bringing Smart Compose to many other applications. So in essence, it can guess what you're going to type, and then all you have to do is go ahead and either swipe the space bar in order to accept it and go on with your day. Really, really great to see this machine learning technology come into the system. And so those are the updates to the Pixel. I'm really excited to see how this web and this web interface and the backup kind of works. I have two Pixel phones. I did note to everybody that I am not I am not against having gadgets, and so I'm interested in seeing how the two different Pixel phones actually work with the recorder. Like, will the microphones be better or worse? That kind of thing. I'm really looking forward to playing with them.
Is that so you have two phones so that you can talk to yourself?
Yes, absolutely. I pick up one and I go, hi, and then I pick up the other and I go, hey. No, it's work separation. I'm trying to create better separation between work, and so two different sides of my work, and so having the two phones has been helping me do that so far.
Wouldn't it be great if cell phones worked more like the ringmaster lines that we had in the 80s, where it rang one kind of ring if it was for the work version of you, like the mom and dad, and a different ring. It used to be a different ring for the kids. You could have a different ring for the people who know you personally. Somebody should work on that. Somebody listening who's in the wireless industry, get on that for us.
Well, but actually, Julie, if you work on the iPhone, again, I'm not an Android guy, so I cannot say, but on the iPhone, you can change the ringtone for people. So in my case, the ringtone is nothing. Okay, do not make noise, because I'm a believer that you need to earn the right to be loud on my phone. So that make it really easy for me to get those noises.
Right. You can get rid of your ringtone, or you can have do not disturb and have priority callers. But what I'm thinking is, if you had two different phone numbers that came into the same phone, so that you had your business line and your personal line all coming into the same piece of hardware, but you would know immediately, so it's like if you're in a business meeting and you get another business call, well, you're not going to answer it because you are prioritizing the client who's right in front of you. However, if you're in a business meeting and the personal rings and you can see that it's your child's school and there's an emergency, you'd be able to address that. Or if you see it's your mother-in-law, you can mute your phone and just push it away.
Yeah, so there are applications actually out there like Line 2 and some others that allow you to be able to have a soft phone. It's not an actual, hard SIM-based line on the phone, and that's really the problem that I'm having, because I have multiple SIM related to my one phone. This gets very complicated, but I have multiple SIMs related to this phone, and I want to leave that personal, and I want the work stuff to be on the other. But because Google binds, I use Google Voice, and so Google binds to the SIM number. You have to have that bound to the SIM number. I can't overcome that physical limitation that Google's providing, so the additional phone is giving me the workaround in essence. But yeah, I would suggest anyone to check out Line 2. I know that GoDaddy also has I forget what they call it, but it's like they also have a phone number. You install an application, and when someone calls, you then have a dedicated number for your business, and then you're controlling for separating the two of them. But I would love greater telecommunications companies to have that control built into the devices. That would be a little bit, I think, more secure than otherwise. All right, moving along, Augusto. What's our next story?
I'm sorry, I'm laughing at the chat as Dr. Buck is saying. I know many people that they think they have earned the right to be loud, but haven't. They're just loud. I'm trying to hold the laugh, and I can't, so I apologize. But
so true.
Our next news is on Microsoft building a new web-based desktop application. And
yeah, so this is for Microsoft Teams.
Teams, yeah.
And so Microsoft Teams currently runs on Electron, akin to Evernote and many other applications, Trello. You name the applications, many of them run on the Electron.js framework, and they are weighty applications. They're actually pretty large installs on most Mac and Windows devices. That notwithstanding, Microsoft Teams gives me so many problems when I have Microsoft Teams meetings. I think I've had the number of Microsoft Teams can be counted on one hand, because every experience with it has been traumatic. And so I've just decided that no. I like this idea of a web app. It's of course going to be more limited, and it's for devices that are resource limited, and that's great, and we'll see what happens. But
we need to see what happened, because it's, as you said, my experience with Teams is especially on the web. Yeah, technically you can go on the web, and every time I go in the web, something happened. With the apps, tend to work better. So,
all right, and with that, we have reached the more than halfway point, but this is the halfway point of our show. We're going to come back and have more Julie Bestry. We're going to have more stories, just a few more stories left in our stories of the week, and then we'll get into new tools and our story of the week and our featured story of the week. So let's hear from our sponsor this week, which is Productivity Voice. See you after the break.
Are you feeling that you need help implementing a personal productivity system, a goal, or a habit like the weekly review? Do you need help making your current system more robust? Do you want a quick checkup of your current systems to ensure they are the best solutions for you? With more than 20 years of experience in technology, personal productivity, and GTD, Productivity Voice can help you review, renew, create, or fine-tune your system and your personal productivity. Visit productivityvoice.com/anythingbutidle for a free 30-minute consultation. Let's achieve more, enjoy more, and feel more wins in the game of being productive. Head over to productivityvoice.com/anythingbutidle today. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back, everybody, to Anything But Idle. I'm here with Augusto Pinaud and our guest today, Julie Bestry from Best Results Organizing. How's it going, Julie?
Good.
Good. All right, we've got a few more stories this week. These are the more heady topics, so we'll be having a little bit of discussion here. And so, Augusto, what is our next story this week?
Our next story comes from Alive for Productivity, and it's titled "Where Do Goals Come From?" And it's a short article to read, but it was really interesting because I do a lot of work with this, and I have said many times that one of the most common problems I found is that when you ask people tend to overestimate what they are going to accomplish in the next 12 months, but underestimate what they are going to accomplish in the next 3 years. And it's typical for me to ask a client, what are you going to do in the next 12 months, and get this long list? How about the next 3 years? And you see one or two things on the bottom of that. And the other problem with that is, what are their values? What I call, when I do coaching, the where. What are the things that don't change in your life, or that change, really slowly with the years? Because when you have those things clear, now you can understand from where those goals and how those goals match those things. And sadly, I see a lot of all over the place, and then what that produces is that one goal you evaluate one way, one goal you evaluate with separate set of criterias, and that will never help you to really have consistency as you move forward and give you that feeling of success and accomplishment.
Yeah, so the article itself really talks about, in essence, why you make goals in the first place. And many times there are these defaults that are running what I consider values, right? So I consider a number of value as much as belief systems having values. And so I use it in a much broader perspective, and I try to keep it in that broad perspective, because sometimes when people say values, they mean different things. And so I try to think about this from everything can be a value. And in essence, he's saying, what are those default values that you have in your life? And sometimes we make our goals based on those defaults without challenging them. And if you can challenge those goals, those values, and still feel like your goal is appropriate, then you're probably making a good choice in terms of having that goal. I feel like that's the message that I got from the article. Is that what you got, Julie?
I would agree. One of the things I took away, though, was that it reminded me of a blog post I'd written a long time ago. We look at SMART goals, and everybody talks about specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely, time-based. I started calling them SMARTY goals, like Smarty Pants. It's like, you need the why at the end. They need to be your goals, because society's goals, your parents' goals for you, your values that we look at. There are these defaults. I think one of the biggest defaults is money, that is attaining things. And a lot of people who have spent their entire lives attaining tangible things or attaining status aren't necessarily happy. And it's that they were chasing, they achieved exactly what they set out to get, but they didn't stop to think, did they want what they were getting? I think a lot of us, Ray, you've heard me talk about, I had been reading last month, the Ada Calhoun book, Why We Can't Sleep. And it's primarily, it's sort of positioned as about the midlife crisis of Gen X women, but it's really applicable to all Gen Xers and really all people, that we were kind of sold a bill of goods, that if we worked hard, if we kept our nose to the grindstone and did these things that were set out, you go to college, you get a job, you get a better job, you do all the things, these things, that you'll be happy. But what if you don't want the big house in the suburbs? Or what if you want the house in the suburbs and you don't want the job that makes you work 60 hours a week? Or maybe you want the job that puts you on TV and podcasts and don't want kids, or you want kids and you don't want all the rest. And we really don't tend, to stop and look at that. I have a conversation with friends all the time. This is dating back to when we got out of college. And I wrote it down after reading the article. What I said is, being smart doesn't obligate you to being aspirational. What you want should only be what you want. You don't have to chase that. And I'm sorry, I thought that was turned off. These things happen.
Of course. Yeah.
She has a red phone, and that was Batman, people. We apologize, but Batman needed to ring.
But you notice I didn't stop till I got to my last word. It was very well timed. There was good time management as far as that goes.
All right, going from goals to a little bit of life-work balance, although the article talks about the problem of work-life balance. What did you think about the article about work-life balance and the problem? What was the argument given by the author, Augusto?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask Julie to start. Why did you throw me under the bus? Jeez.
No, so I can do
balance,
it. I just thought...
Yeah, work-life balance is like minimalism. Okay, I never throw you first under that bus.
So I'll cover the big ticket items, and so this is by Anne-Laure Lecunff, and what she's talking about here is, as she says, the problem with work-life balance is that work. Just summarizing her bullet points here, and I'm reading her bullet points. That is, she says work and life are not strictly separated. Your work is not necessarily just a job. Your work may be just a job. You may not want to achieve work-life balance. Work-life balance assumes a narrow definition of work, and work-life balance is a myth. I mean, she basically covers all of the big ticket points of why, when we talk about life-work balance, we are frequently talking about mythology, and that frequently brings up all kinds of triggers for people that make them feel like somehow they are wrong. And as I want to always say, it's that let's stop talking about how much people are wrong, and let's talk about systems that help people actually grow. And if we stop talking about systems like this concept of work-life balance, then we actually can start dealing with the issues of, yes, you may feel a pain point, and that will make you want to change as much as you can want to grow and do this from a joyful perspective. Julie, what were your thoughts there regarding the article?
I thought the way it was broken down was really important. Sometimes you have a job that's just a job. And another expression my friends and I, when we worked in television, used to have to remind one another when things got rough, it's just a job, it's not your life. Because especially in your 20s and 30s, when you are still, taking all of your building blocks to create a life, your job is the biggest part, and it can feel like it is your entire life. This is why historically, when you didn't have work-life balance, when men got to retirement age, their identity, and once they stepped over that dividing line, they turned 65, they got the gold watch, and they retired, their identities were gone. Women had previously experienced this with the empty nest syndrome. Men don't usually worry about the empty nest. When you have a job that is all consuming in your life, it's often, okay, it's all right that I don't have, friends or health or a nice house or anything, because look how successful I am that I'm doing XYZ in my career, until what happens and the business world tanks and your company downsizes everybody and there is no job. What happens to your identity? So whatever you're doing, it's like what Ray said, whatever you embrace is going to be what's important to you. Okay. Whether it's what you want to be important to you is another thing. So you're going to have to take the skill, learn the skills. We're all going to have to look at our lives, to have that self-knowledge and say, okay, for this week or for this portion of my life, I'm going to focus on my career, but it's not going to be the only thing I do. I'm still going to have elements of working on my health, working on my friendships. As guys, that it's hard to make friendships after school. Once you get into your 30s and beyond. But because men and women make friendships differently, which is a huge part of that work-life balance, women tend to build these rich, robust relationships, according to research, based on discussion and experience. And men's relationships tend to be more based on activities. So women build these rich, robust relationships, and men tend to be friends with their wives' friends' husbands and their kids' friends' parents, and do activities with them. But there's that lack of depth, so that if you move to another city, you don't have that relationship anymore. Guys don't tend to call and chat with each other on the phone for an hour. Women, at least Gen X women, still talk on the telephone and have a little bit more of that work-life balance. And again, it's a terrible term because it makes you think you're looking at a scale or a seesaw, and we need to come up with a better metaphor.
And that's where my problem comes in the term, because people tend to think it need to balance, and it doesn't. I mean, it's okay to be on a period of your life where you are all work, or you are all life, and you are all whatever. What is important is that you are clear on the why you are doing that, and why, and you are conscious of that balance or unbalance, or whatever you wanted to call it. It's okay to that your life and your work is the same, and it's okay that your work, it's and you're extremely passionate about it. All that is okay. What is important in this case is what worked to your why, what gets to that why, what resonates with that why, you know and I see it in people who, well, I need to get the new job. Why? Well, because I've been 3 years in this. And so what is what you want? You need the new job. Why? You need to have you consider, and I tell this to people a lot, what's working before you go and look for the new shiny object. Figure it out what's working on the current, because I see so many people changing from A to B and discover, oh, and now I miss all this. And some of the things are silly. I was working with somebody pretty senior, and one of his criteria was as a Microsoft Surface. Okay, and we may laugh about, and he said, "Oh, no. If I need to move to this thing need to come with me, and if the other corporation cannot offer me this same technology, I'm not interested." Was one of his criterias. And it sounds silly, but that level of clarity and that level of know the why and what you want, it is really, really important. And sadly, most people don't have it. And what they are looking is a way in which I will put two A's on one side and two B's on the other one, and somehow they're balanced. The balance is relevant only in regards to your why and nothing else.
Fantastic. And so we have one final story before we go to our tools of the week. And this story actually ends up being a video that I will embed, or Augusto will embed, one of us will embed in the show notes itself. So it's a YouTube video. It was by the Microsoft Work Labs team. They were having a discussion around basically research that they've been doing at the Work Labs program around virtual work. And of course, one of those things, that's why the video is called, you should have a virtual commute, was this idea of helping to establish routines, helping to establish productivity behavioral interventions that can really help make people more productive. And of course, they're talking about that from a Microsoft flair, but I really found the conversation very thought-provoking, in the sense that it really made you think about how you set up your virtual environment and how you actually work throughout your day. Again, from my perspective, routines are far more important than habits. And so in that sense, when they talk about the virtual commute, it's about establishing a routine and helping you be more productive by virtue of that scaffolding, the things that are anchored to your day that will happen, and therefore you can actually take advantage of them. And so I just thought the conversation was really quite interesting. And yeah, I really recommend that you go ahead and watch it, after the show. That being the case, Augusto, did you have any comments? And then we'll go
Yeah,
into new tools.
and actually, I will keep it short, but I think it's important that people review these behaviors often, especially with all the changes that we are having, because the routines has changed and we have established emergency routines, and those emergency routines now have been turning into more permanent routines. Evaluate them and see what is working and what is not working for you, and what need to be changed or added, because it is really important, and yes, we all need them.
Absolutely. And so with that, we have reached the end of our normal headlines for the week. We still have new tools of the week and then our featured story before we wrap. And so new tools of the week, of course, is our time to talk to you about personal productivity tools and services that we think you might like. Augusto and I come across many personal productivity tools and services each week. And so in this segment, we get to share a couple of them with you. And so in honor of International Women's Day, and actually one of the women who is in the running for the top 10 female productivity experts is I wanted to just give a hat tip to Penny Zenker. She has an assessment called the P10 Productivity Accelerator. You can take the assessment and really understand where you are with regard to your own productivity. And so you should definitely check it out. It is at P10.app, I believe it is. And I'm trying to get over to this screen. There we go. And so if you go to that P10.app, you can go ahead and learn more about the assessment. But in essence, you go ahead and evaluate yourself, and then it gives you really great ability for you to be able to track then your success toward these particular areas that Penny has identified. And so a technologist, a CEO, and a really great person all around. She's been on the show here. Actually, she was on the show the last time Julie was here on the show with us. And so you might not have recognized her because she was in a Halloween costume, but but she is a serious technologist and a serious productivity expert. And so just really, I wanted to let everybody know that the P10 app is out there. The Productivity Accelerator app is available to you. And so check it out. Augusto, what is your new tool this week?
So the new tool is an application it's a widget for iOS called What Are You Doing Now? And, with all the distractions with this pandemic has been increasing. So it is important sometimes to write down what you're doing. And this application allows you to write one thing. That's it. It's a widget and you can write one thing. So it is really cool for when you get that interruption and you can come in a widget really quick and write a writing proposal. Okay, so when the people leave, okay, now you can come back to do that. And you can come back to that thing. A piece of paper work, but the reality is most of us are glued to the device. So it is really, really useful to have that short reminder for when you get stuck and when you get distracted and instead of coming back to, okay, what I was doing when I got interrupted, and waste, a significant amount of time.
Fantastic. Wonderful. And now, Julie, what's your tool this week?
Yeah, I cheated since I'm the woman on the call. I cheated, and I have two, but they're related. So when I find out about a lot of posts when I decide when I decide what I'm going to write a blog post about. And last week I was talking about accountability. I wrote this blog post, Count on Accountability, 5 productivity support solutions. And I was speaking generally about, getting accountability partners, groups, working with professionals, using apps and events. And the thing about accountability partners is you don't always want to count on a friend or a colleague. Sometimes you want somebody who is disinterested in your life. So you're getting that feedback. You're getting the accountability of working with someone. This notion is that productivity is boosted anywhere from 200 to 300% when you do co-working. And I know, Ray, you are all about co-working. So,
yes.
I know you appreciate that. So FocusMate was my first. So what I love is that you can go in, you sign up, you have an idea of what you're going to work on. And for 50 minutes, you get assigned a partner. And basically you're seeing one another, just like on a Zoom or a FaceTime or something. You have somebody to say, it's sort of like that virtual desk partner in college where you had somebody sitting across the desk, and it's body doubling, what we call in professional organizing, that notion of body doubling. You're both doing the work simultaneously. You're not necessarily having to interact with one another, but there's this external accountability regarding you're externalizing your own goals, because you do better when you are doing something for someone else. We're terrible at accomplishing things for ourselves, but when we have somebody else has a vested interest in us, even in a very theoretical way, this is great. So I liked FocusMate's approach. It was very straightforward. It was very simple. And then related to that, because we were at this task management conference, I ended up writing a blog post that went live this morning about faux accountability. I called it Flow and Faux Accountability. And one of the things that we've seen is that people have Zoom fatigue, having to deal, especially now where we can't be together and we're staring at the computers all the time. Our eyeballs are just tired of this. So I looked at, instead of our eyes, what if we had an auditory way of feeling like we were around other people without actually having to talk to them? And so there were a number of options in today's blog post, but this, which you've got up on the screen, Sounds of Colleagues, is just wonderful. You can use the sliders to, as you can see, adjust everything from the coffee machine, which is much fancier coffee machine sound than any of you probably had in your offices before you went remote. The sounds of people, the printer, the rain on the window. I will warn you, however, you probably are going to want to keep the office dog. It's a very barky, whimpery office dog. And sometimes you get to hear somebody whispering, good boy. But the office dog gets a little tiresome after a while. And I would also, just like in real life, turn the slider for the telephone down, because it's kind of an annoying phone. This was put together by a Swedish ad agency in combination with a sort of recording studio that works with the ad agency to come up with these sounds. It's very simple. There's nothing fancy. You can also click on the Spotify, and instead of having this playing all day in your background, you can get almost like an album. Remember record albums? You get what's called a playlist of different types of office sounds. So you can get there's one called cocktails and typewriters. And those are about anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes of very specific office sounds, so that you can get a sense of the atmosphere that you like. So you can either get actual accountability working with other people, or you can create an environment that gives you some faux accountability so that you can get into flow.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julie, for the 2 tools of the week. And so those are our new tools of the week. And that leads us to our discussion today on the featured story this week. And this is all about, really, the functionality is quite plain. So Apple has created a facility for being able to automatically transfer iCloud photos to Google Photos. And what I wanted us to talk about was, why the heck is Apple doing this? Why did they decide to build this functionality into it? And what productive uses do we have around this tool? And so who wants to kick off the conversation of why did Apple do this? Go for it, Julie.
Well, I don't know why they did it. I know why I might want it. Mm-hmm. You either get some free iCloud space or 99 cents a month, or then you jump to this big expensive thing. Well, if you've ever been on vacation, I was on vacation in Europe, and I ran out of space because the photos that I was taking were taking up so much of my iCloud space. And so I had to offload some apps and sort of do that on the fly. I think because, and somebody who's got more experience in iCloud photos could tell me otherwise, but if we could have our photos in iClouds, but maybe iCloud photos, but not necessarily have them on the phone and taking up space, we could use our phone a little better. I think sometimes being able to sort of have yet another backup, have another space to move it to for functionality, I don't know why Apple's doing it other than people wanted it, but it makes it a lot easier because if you've ever had to take your photos from your phone, and if you wanted, it's like, okay, I need to get them from my phone, but back them up. It's like, okay, there's Amazon photos, there's iCloud photos. It can be really overwhelming. To have a switch that you can flip is going to make people happier. And Apple likes to do things that make people think they're going to be happier because of Apple. It doesn't seem like a financially advantageous decision for them, but
yeah, I'm right with you. I think this is a backup utility solely and purely. There's no other cost justification for Apple to try and reduce its cloud services, and this is not a way for you to offload data in some way, shape, or form. This was that it gives you a bit of safety in numbers. That is, if you can place your photos in Google easily, Apple is not going to lose business to Google Photos. In essence, people are either Apple fans or Google fans. They're living in one of those ecosystems, and they're going to stay there. But if I can back up my data outside of the system, just in case, literally all of the photos I own today are digital. And so every memory I own that is outside of my own brain is in a digital format. And for me, that's in a Google environment. But I've made the decision to back those up to another service so that should, I can somehow lose access to my Google account. There's any number of things that can go wrong in the digital ID world that I could lose access. I want to have a backup. And to date, Apple really didn't give you a really great way to do that. And I think you're absolutely right, Julie, that Apple just decided, just for convenience for customers to be able to do a backup, this is available only in a few countries. So just so that everybody's aware, this is available in Australia, Canada, the EU, Iceland, Liechtenstein, New Zealand, Norway, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And it can take several days for that to take place. You also must have two-factor authentication turned on your Apple ID account, and of course have a Google account. You have to have a Google Photos account in order for that to do that. And so your iCloud account may have 20, 30, 40, 100 gigabytes of data. You also have to have a Google Photos account with a Google One plan that can fit that data. So it's not like this is free. I guess if you had under 15 gigabytes worth of photos, that will transfer in the free plan to Google Photos. But if it's over that, then you need to have a paid plan in order for that transfer to take place.
And photos are the one thing that people cannot bear to lose, no matter, even if you're running a business in your computer, if you're using the belt and suspenders approach, if you've got your computer, your local backup, and your cloud backup, you're happy. I don't know anybody who's happy with just the belt and suspenders approach. Everybody I know who really cares about their photos has like 5 or 6 complete backups everywhere, because your photos are your memory. When it is proof that you lived your existence.
Yeah. And I think there are a couple of interesting things, and one that Ray mentioned is there is this mindset that everything Apple is expensive, and I'm not saying they're cheap, but show that hey, fine, we'll let you move your pictures to Google and discover that it's not as cheap as you thought it was. Okay. And that is a good thing. You could do that, similar things like that with Dropbox for a while. You can install Dropbox and tell Dropbox to back up all your pictures on your iOS as well as the Mac. So I think it gives the users the ability to feel, okay, my photos are so important, as Dr. Buck is sharing. Let me give you many options that you can back them up outside. So that way, if something happened to them, it's not my responsibility now. It is also yours that decide not to take advantage of these things. And, we have heard horrors of people losing, their pictures for not having backup. So this is the kind of news that will make a lot of noise for regular people. So we'll give them an option to maybe learn about make backups of their pictures. So at least that's what I hope.
Yes, and so continuing on that vein, just note that even if you do use this service, the smart albums, live photos, your photo stream content, some of the metadata, and some raw photos will not be transferred. It covers a whole wide variety of formats. So most photos will easily move over, most videos will move over, but there are some raw photos. It says I couldn't see a specific reasoning why one photo wouldn't or otherwise. There may be size limits associated because raw photos can be fairly large, but some photos will not be available, some will. So some will transfer. So just know this is not going to transfer. It's not just copying and pasting everything. It's selective in that regard. So just be mindful of that. All right, that brings us. Julie, there you are, Julie. Technology.
I wonder what happened with Julie.
No. Sometimes people leave the stage to sneeze or whatever.
I got kicked out.
You got the proverbial digital hook. But we have reached the end of the show. I can't believe it. It's flown right by, Julie. I really want to thank you for joining us and throughout the entire show and your contributions. And I'm looking forward to next episode when we are talking about the quote unquote winners of the top 10 female productivity organization and technology experts.
Well, I was thrilled to be here. I love hanging out with you guys. It's like we hung out all weekend at the summit, so this was perfect.
And how can folks keep up to date with the great work that you're doing?
Well, I would say the best way to do it is go to my website, which is my name. It's juliebestry.com. And I invite you to go to my Paper Doll blog. I don't just blog about paper, but paper and information. And paper includes those little green pieces of paper, and even when they're recognized digitally, everything in our lives comes down to that kind of information. So
wonderful. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Oh, she said thank you for having you. And we thank her. Thank you. And so, Augusto, that's it. Thank you very much, as always, for joining me here on Anything But Idle.
It's always fun.
All right, everybody. If we have missed something, a story, feel free to head over to Anything But Idle. Basically, everything that you will need is on anythingbutidle.com. So if we missed a story, if you need to comment or ask a question about a particular show or a particular story that we covered, feel free to head over to anythingbutidle.com. There on the episode page, you can leave a comment or question. Additionally, you will also find show notes inside of every episode. So those will include links to all of our stories. As I noted, the video from Microsoft will embed it directly there in the show notes. Tools of the week, extra stories that we didn't get to cover in the show, those are all caked in there. We also have text transcripts available for PDF download, or you can actually read it directly on the page. Just click on that read more link and it'll pop it out, and so you can listen and read along with the transcript. If this is your first time watching the live stream, feel free to hit the subscribe button. That'll give you notifications when we go live in the future. You can also click the thumbs up icon, and that helps us to bring new personal productivity enthusiasts to the show and into the fold, and so thank you for doing that. You can also subscribe or follow. It's a free option to be able to follow our podcast in your favorite podcast app, so you can find that after the fact if you are not joining us live during the show. And I know many of you listen to the show after the fact, so thank you for doing that. So with that, we'll see you all next time here on Anything But Idle. Here's to your productive life.